Hello, my friends. Welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. This is another jam-packed episode. I finished 8 books, actually more than that, but I'm going to tell you about 8 that I finished in the past week. And I've been busy doing all kinds of things, going to vote. We had a federal election on Monday. Our Prime Minister is Mark Carney. There was a funny episode on This Hour Has 22 Minutes, which is a political comedy show here in Canada, where Mark Critch interviewed Mark Carney, and they were at a Tim Hortons. And some of you know that I collect Tim Hortons references in literature. I wish there was some way to also collect this because it's just so very Canadian. Let's put it that way. I'll leave a link to that short video if you're curious, if you haven't seen it. Every Friday there's a Planet Earth poetry event held at Russell Books. I've been a few times, so I went this Friday with Lori. She read at the open mic. It's always great to hear poetry. And then this past weekend, it was Canada's Independent Bookstore Day, and I went to 2 different bookstores. I'll tell you a little bit about my book haul later. I also went to the opera. We saw Rigoletto, Verdi's Rigoletto here in Victoria. And then just this week, also a musical kind of medley production of the songs of Gordon Lightfoot. This was at the Belfry Theatre, If You Could Read My Mind. And one of the lyrics in that title song is, "And you won't read that book again because the ending's just too hard to take," which got me thinking about which books have an ending that is too hard to take. I don't have any specific ones to share with you, but if you have ones you want to share with me, please let me know in the comments, all right? What else did I do? I gave Joni her summer haircut, so she is now a short-haired dog. You can see her eyes and her lovely spots, her coloring. She looks like a seal. At Russell Books, for their Independent Bookstore Day, they had a buy 2, get 1 free special. So I went all out. They have both new and used books. And in the used books, I found some great graphic novels that I am going to give to one of my great nieces. And in the knitting section, I found some books that I had been looking for. If you want to know about the knitting books, you can ask me in the comments. So I also stopped at Monroe's Books and got a stack there as well. So this is a combination from both bookstores. I got The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating by Elizabeth Bailey. I have been wanting to read this for so long, and I thought if I have it on my shelf, maybe I'll finally get to it. Kendra recently talked about it on Sean Bree's Books channels, which just reminded me to look for it when I was there and found it. There were also a lot of poem in your pocket examples, both at both bookstores. Poetry in Your Pocket is an initiative from the League of Canadian Poets, and this one is especially celebrating Independent Bookstore Day. It's very short. It's by Maya Spoken. Real love says you are enough before you even try to be. Isn't that great? Now this one I did have out from the library, Journeys to the Nearby. A gardener discovers the gentle art of untraveling, and it's by Elspeth Bradbury. So when I had it out from the library, I didn't have a chance to read it, and there was a waiting list, so I had to bring it back. And I thought, She's a local author, BC author. This is a book about how you can explore new things just in your own garden. And yeah, that really appeals to me. So I had read, I think, the first chapter of the library book, so I knew this was definitely a book for me. It's also got these lovely illustrations by the author. I'll tell you more about it when I read it. I picked up The Trees of Victoria, Colin Varner. This one, it's a guidebook, and the trees that grow here in Victoria are so different from the ones that I'm familiar with, having spent most of my life in Alberta and in Edmonton. And so a lot of times I'm looking at a tree thinking, what is that? So now I've got a guidebook. Speaking of plants, I picked up Planta Sapiens from the really marked down shelf. I think this was $7. It's by Paco Calvo, and it's about plant intelligence. I think it was the booktuber Books at the Bottom of the Stairs talked about this a long time ago, and I've been wanting to read it ever since. So now I have it. Got a couple of poetry books by Indigenous authors. Body More Tolerable by J. Simpson. She is Oji Cree Soto. She calls herself indigiqueer. She's trans. I have one of her earlier, maybe the only earlier collection. I can't remember if she has more than two. Anyway, I know this is going to be good. And the Métis author Marilyn Dumont, South Side of a Kinless River, another poetry collection. This one I picked up used at Russell Books. It's Arlene Paré, who is a local lesbian poet, and it was in the poetry section, and I thought it was poetry, even though it says right on the cover, Leaving Now, a Novel. And the novel is actually written in both prose and poetry. It's the story of a woman who has children, leaves her husband, and has a relationship with a woman. So, sounds good. And I've got Wildlife by Amanda Leduc. I didn't even realize that she had a new novel out. Her previous, her debut novel, Centaur's Wife, came out a while back, and I also read her memoir, Disfigured. She writes about disability, and Wildlife, from what I've just got from the jacket, is about a couple of talking hyenas interacting with humans. I'm here for it. And there's one more. Madeline Dean's new novel, The Book of Records. I am so excited about this. Definitely going to be getting to this one very soon. Okay, on to the books that I have finished, starting with Band Together. This is an anthology that was edited by Ashley Hope Pérez and illustrated by Debbie Fong. There are 16 different authors there, and they are sharing short stories, memoir, poetry, comics, essays, and there are at least 6 queer writers in here. Maya Kobabe, Bill Konigsberg, Kyle Lukoff, Trung Le Nguyen, Robin Stevenson, and MariNaomi. There is so much that I learned in this book. You know, I thought I knew a lot about banned books already, but there's more. So, stats, facts. For example, the Brooklyn Public Library offered free e-cards to anyone in the U.S. between ages 13 and 21 in an effort to make banned books more available to young readers. And a teacher in Oklahoma lost her job for giving her students the QR code for the free e-card, and now she works at Brooklyn Public Library. Hoopla and Libby / Overdrive are used to access digital content from libraries, and they are now banned in Mississippi for anyone under age 18. And there are school libraries all over the place that are not allowing the use of these digital apps. Of 1,000 book challenges, 60% were submitted by just 11 people, and one man was responsible for 92 of them. There's a piece by Kelly Jensen, who shares the Miller test for obscenity. It's very clear. So this is something that's used in the United States. The rules around obscenity in Canada are different. And speaking of Canadians, Robin Stevenson is one of the contributors. She's the author of Pride Puppy and many, many other great books. She talks about how being taught to hate yourself poses a far greater danger than any book can. She also writes about how much of the rhetoric about book banning emphasizes the need to protect children, but in fact, most of books being removed from shelves are from high school libraries. And we're talking about students that are nearly ready to go out into the world. Many of them already have driver's licenses. Some of them already have kids. Yeah. This is an excellent collection. It's also really heavy. It's got a glossy clay paper. At my YA book club discussion last night, one of the women mentioned how heavy it is and how publishers weren't thinking about students carrying this in their backpack. I've already returned it to the library. There's a waiting list. I'm glad there's a waiting list for it. I want everyone to read it. Next up is an audiobook, Shy Creatures by Clare Chambers. She is a British writer. Has written actually many novels, but this is the first for me. And I picked it up because of one of my subscribers, Jacqueline McMenamin, who recommended it. So thank you, Jacqueline. It's set in 1960s London, and it's from the viewpoint of an art therapist who's working at a psychiatric hospital. So she is having an affair with a married colleague, a doctor named Gil. And in the first hour of the book, that's what, is most of the story. And it ends up being quite slow getting started. I almost DNF'd this until I got to the point where the author based this on a true event. So she was inspired by it, I should say, which is that a man was discovered having lived in seclusion in a house in London with his elderly aunt for decades. So what Clare Chambers has done is, imagined what it would have been like for this man. And as soon as we got to that point, I was into it, yeah. Through the various characters in this novel, we can see that there's more than one way to live a life that's confined. Yeah. The doctor, Gil, his ideal is to have doctors and patients living in community as equals. And this is actually an idea that I think it was R.D. Laing came up with and did experiment with, but also in France. So because I read graphic nonfiction called The Third Population. I'll have to look up the creators of that book, but it is about a real place that has been going since 1956. It's called La Chesnay, and I will I'll include the title and everything in the show notes. I do recommend that book. And I recommend Shy Creatures if you are looking for something for Mental Health May that has a happy ending. Mental Health May is a reading event that is sponsored by Kim of Middle of the Book March and Marilyn Maya Mendoza. There is lots going on in May. May 5th is Red Dress Day. That is also a national day of remembrance and activism, honoring the lives of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people. This began with the Red Dress Project, created by Métis artist Jamie Black in 2010. And on this day, red dresses will be draped in trees, hanging from windows, pinned to jackets, worn as earrings, and red hands painted across faces. Canadian statistics report that more than 6 in 10 Indigenous women have experienced physical or sexual assault in their lifetime. And in addition, Indigenous women and girls are greatly overrepresented among long-term, unresolved missing persons cases. So on May 5th, I plan to read Little Moons by Jen Storm with illustrations by Ryan Howe. May is Asian Heritage Month in Canada, and I've got Madeline Teen's book to read for that. I saw recently that we passed the 50th anniversary of Operation Babylift. That was the evacuation of thousands of orphans from Saigon in April of 1975. It was during what Vietnamese call the American War. And if you are looking for another suggestion for Asian Heritage Month, I recommend M by Kim Thuy, translated to English by Sheila Fischman. It is excellent. I've got a couple of other books that I've read kind of in advance of Asian Heritage Month. So I read something for People April, the event hosted by Roz of Scallydandling About the Books and Elizabeth of Bouquins and Books, reading nonfiction about people. So what I picked up was Turning Japanese by MariNaomi. I actually went looking for something by her after reading MariNaomi's piece in Band Together, the book that I told you about at the start of this video. She is a bisexual, non-binary cartoonist, and in this memoir, she's talking about the time when she was 22 in 1995, and she worked at a Japanese-American hostess bar, first in San Jose, and then because she wanted to improve her Japanese, her mother was Japanese, moved to the United States as an adult and married a white American, but didn't teach her daughter Japanese. So MariNaomi wanted to improve her language skills. So she and her fiance of the time, Giuseppe, went to Japan and spent a few months there. And she worked in a hostess bar there. And there's a lot of kind of quiet humor, just the cultural experiences, and her realization that there are profound differences between Americans and Japanese people. And there's kind of a connection to my next book, an audiobook, And What Can I Offer You Tonight by Premee Mohamed, because this is set in a house of courtesans. It's in the voice of a courtesan, Jewel. When it opens, there's a memorial service being held for her friend and co-worker, Winfield, who has been murdered. So Premee Mohamed, let's just back up a bit and talk about the author. She's an Indo-Caribbean scientist and speculative fiction writer who lives in Edmonton, Alberta. And this book is combining a whole bunch of genres: far future, dystopian, fantasy, noir, murder mystery, horror, and it's a novella. So the audiobook is less than 3 hours long. And what we find out at the beginning is that Winfield, who was murdered, as I said, comes back to life. She wants revenge on the murderer, and she wants Jewel to help her. To give you an idea of the tone, I'm just going to read you a teeny bit. She's young, and she's pretty, and she's dead, but she's not a fool. I think that's enough. My next book combines two different April BookTube events, People April and Picture This. So I think this is the third year of Picture This. Jack of Spread Book Joy and Shelley Swearingen have been encouraging adults to read picture books. I picked up What I Must Tell the World, How Lorraine Hansberry Found Her Voice. And it's written by Jay Leslie and illustrated by Loveis. These are two Black creators. Jay Leslie is in Germany and Loveis is in California. They're a non-binary illustrator. Lorraine Hansberry, as you probably know, is an African-American lesbian playwright, and I love the fact that the authors of this picture book mention that. That's part of the story. She is the woman who wrote A Raisin in the Sun, that groundbreaking play that Angelia of Read and Reread included in her Endless Drama project. That was one of the February reads. Well, I learned that the circumstances in that play are drawn from Lorraine Hansberry's own family experience of her family in Chicago moving to a whites-only area. There's so much that you can learn from picture books and at the same time enjoy gorgeous art. My next three books also come from the African diaspora. I'm going to start with the novel We the Kindling by Otonya, Okot, Bitek. This author was born in Kenya to Ugandan parents, and she has lived in Canada for more than 3 decades. The story is told in voices of 3 women who were captured by the Lord's Resistance Army in northern Uganda when they were young teens or children. So after the war, or if they escaped, they returned home sometimes many years later, and they were traumatized. They were scarred from beatings that left their skin shredded. They were scarred from having to walk through razor-sharp grass, and from repeated rapes, from being given to men as wives, men who were old enough to be their grandfather. They bore a lot of children. They had children die. So they returned very much changed. And some of these chapters are in the first person plural, and I'll give you an example of the style. We waited to forget everything. We had not asked for it. None of us had. Could our mothers love us after all we'd experienced? Could anybody? Some of our mothers would not look at us. They'd moved on. They'd remarried. They'd had other children. At first, we thought we saw love mingled with relief in our fathers' eyes as tears ran down their faces. But over time, our fathers started to mutter under their breaths. They did not bring up their daughters that way, to have children like that, to be wild like animals. This is heartbreaking and so well done, and I highly recommend it. Read it for Mental Health May. Read it for Misery May. The theme this year is misery around the world. Scott of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot and Gemma of Gemma Books are hosting this readathon. I submitted my suggestion for Misery May. It's by a South Korean author. I will link the video. I won't tell you which book it is. You have to watch the video to see that. My final two books are both by Dionne Brand. She's a Trinidadian Canadian. She's queer. She moved to Canada as an adult, I believe. I have loved many of her books in the past. I went to hear her give the Kreisel lecture. It was called An Autobiography of an Autobiography of Reading. And this was a few years ago. And what Brand has done has taken that lecture and included it within this book, Salvage, Readings from the Wreck. And it's about what reading Western literature does to a non-white reader. Look at all my notes. My Lesbian Plus book club is going to be discussing this. I have so much to say about it. I'm just going to share a little bit with you here. I received those 17th, 18th, and 19th century novels, or pieces of them, first as a child and then as an adult, as lesson and meta-lesson about piety, about obligation, about economy, about how privilege is gained and lost, about the place that I, and those like me, occupied. Those who stood outside the address were positioned to desire entry, but that entrance would have to be accomplished by self-immolation. The conviction that other people were to be subjugated for their own good buttressed the 17th, 18th, and 19th century novel. Mine is not an argument about being absent from literary texts. We were not absent. We were in the texts, potent as life, but we and others were trained to remove or skirt our presence, or to observe that presence as something like background, immutable, not subject to the action of the text. She points out a romantic trope of capital, that oppressed Black people love their oppressors. I have seen that in books, and it just seems ridiculous to me. Like, who is supposed to believe that? She spends a lot of time with Robinson Crusoe, and she says some contemporary readers might say, well, it was the time. Do not blame the author or his narrator for these ideas. The novel is a work of art. It cannot be reduced to this reading. But those readers cannot have it always. First, enslaved people also lived in their time. They lived in the same time as this novel's author and narrator, and any equivocation places and objectifies enslaved people as inanimate and inhuman, like a chair or an axe. It bestows once again the mantle of the human on the European. Yes, the text is a work of art, as we have come to define art, and yes, it is also reducible to its origins and its imaginaries, which are produced by its historical place, environment, and quotidian details. I'm reminded of something that Darren Bell talked about in his memoir, The Talk, when he was at university. And he objected to, I can't even remember which book it was, and its portrayal of slavery. And the other students around him said, well, people didn't know it was wrong then. Darren Bell said, yes, people who were slaves, they knew it was wrong. There was a French writer, Patrick Chamoiseau, who rewrote Robinson Crusoe, and in the notes at the end of his book, Chamoiseau remarks, it's sad, Defoe's Crusoe was a slave trader. But then Dionne Brand says, this reader asks, why is that sad? It is sad only if you want to read the tale as universal, or if you wish to read the human as universal rather than an invention of post-slavery Europe. It is sad if you wish to read Defoe or Crusoe as the universal man. I am not sad that Crusoe was a slaver. I am sad that I have had to read him as the universal human. When she's talking about Jane Austen's Mansfield Park, she says, I stop at the thought that it's a novel of aesthetic, intellectual complexity. We attach these ascriptions to works many years after their creation through the very long and insistent processes of empire that cause them to arrive as objects of aesthetic value. Even more, there are social processes that assign aesthetic value to visual and textual objects, processes that have to do with systems of ruling. How is a Gucci logo bag beautiful? It really isn't. It's only Gucci. Why is a Louis Vuitton logo bag beautiful and desirable? It is repetitive and unremarkable. It signals wealth, not beauty. Its stamp signals class, acquisition, desire, extraction, and the sameness. A paper bag is more beautiful. This is not an easy read. It's heavy, and it's really good, but the language is on the academic side, but on the other hand, it is certainly of interest to anyone who is curious about how books shape us in our self-identity. I really, really loved this a lot. And it made me want to read more by Dionne Brand. I had this poetry collection on my shelf, unread. It's all the way back from 2006. It's called Inventory. It's actually a long narrative inventorying the human casualties of war happening across the globe. There's a lot of despair in here, as you can imagine. And there's also elegant language. She's giving a dignity, I think, to every human life. And her desire for a better world comes through. I will just read you a few fragments. I wish I had beautiful legs to get me to another planet. On reading this, someone will say, God, is there no happiness then? Of course, tennis matches and soccer games and river song and bird song and wine, naturally, and some Sundays and some highways with the relief of water and wildflowers at the end and fresh snapper and wild salmon, though that all depends on killing something, and the eagerness of children and their certainty and how they try to walk straight, the surface of the earth, how it keeps springing back, for now, and the irregular weather of hurricanes, tsunamis, floods, sunlight on any given day, anywhere, however disastrous, at least magnificent. A stick when you're walking through an unknown forest, so defensive, so stable, yet blithe, like a feral dog. Coastlines in general, especially from the ferry between Vancouver and Galiano. Some lovers, of course, the way they made you laugh, the way they held their heads. Then, too, the relief of their leaving, of course. Happiness is not the point, really. It's a marvel, an accusation in our time. I have nothing soothing to tell you. That's not my job. My job is to revise and revise this bristling list hourly. And my job is to tell you about books, and that's what I've done. Thank you so very much for watching. I always love to hear from you, so please do say hello in the comments. And happy reading, everybody. I'll see you all again soon. Bye for now.